Reason number 3 is that it can withstand greater forces. So when it's in the neutral posture, and what we're going to do here as well is we're going to include a brace to it. So when we go into a neutral posture and then stiffen or brace the abdominals, it can withstand a greater force than when it's in a flexed position and stiffened, but also when it's just in a flexed position. So what does this mean? So let's say we're lifting a weight from the floor, be it a shopping bag, be it a baby, be it a heavy weight or a light weight in the gym. There are essentially 3 options that we can have. The best option, which I've kind of been describing as we go, is that neutral posture. So what we're doing is we're setting the spine in place for the forces to be distributed evenly across it. When we then add the brace to it, what we then do is essentially lock that position in. Yes, there are going to be greater forces because of the load that we're going to be lifting and because of the muscle activation that we have around it, but essentially that neutral posture can withstand those greater loads. And then when you put all of that together with the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, with all the muscles and the abdominal fascia, the thoracolumbar fascia, which is essentially the same thing, when you put all that together, you create one unit that will be able to manage and withstand any greater forces. So, number 1, as I mentioned, is being in a neutral posture and lifting. The second option, if option number 1 isn't available to you for whatever reason, because of the position the object in or because of the posture that you need to get into because it's awkward, it's in the back of a car, whatever it may be, it's not a simple lift from the floor and I can manage where I lift it. So if the spine has to flex, then what we need to be able to do is brace around it, because the brace is what's giving it that ability to withstand a greater force. So if it goes into a slightly flexed position, that's more advantageous than going into a fully flexed position and bracing, because neutral spine with a brace is number 1. Flexed spine or mildly flexed spine with a brace is number 2. Fully flexed spine with a brace is number 3. And then sort of the worst option is to go into that lift, go into flexion, come out of flexion and possibly into extension, and then pop the weight back down and do it again. Fully flexed, open back out. So that movement without much of an abdominal brace is going to cause the most problems. So when we go into the neutral spine, there are also, which we're going to talk about later, there are also some other things. We need to be able to hinge at the hip. So for example, if we're in a very controlled environment and we're doing a deadlift, so a deadlift is where the weight is on the floor, it's a dead weight on the floor and we're lifting it up into a standing position. If we can get down there with a neutral spine, brace and sort of full hip hinge, full hip flexion and maintain that position, that's going to be the best position we can be in. If we've got the weight on the floor, but we can't get down there with a neutral spine because we don't have range of movement at the hips, long term, we want to get range of movement at the hips so we can maintain position of the spine. In the short term, depending on why and what, if there's a competition that's happening tomorrow and we need to do some lifts, then okay, there may be some reason for flexing the spine, but we need to brace around it. But again, longer term strategy would be, instead of trying to get down into there with a flexed spine, lift the weight up so you maintain the neutral spine. So we don't have to go down into the hips. In the meantime, we're working on flexion of the hip, being able to flex the hip so we can get down there. We may also be training with a very light weight on trying to get down there and using the position as a form of stretching to get down there. So there are many different options about how we can get down into the hips and how we can sort of build the competency of the spine and the capacity of the spine to withstand greater load. But in the meantime, for the short term, it's more advantageous to lift the weight off the floor instead of persisting with keeping the weight on the floor with a flexed spine. It's more advantageous to lift it up and maintain the neutral spine. So that's how we're going to be able to withstand greater load. And then that will be able to be transferred out into everyday life where we're lifting our shopping bags up, where we may need to flex the spine mildly or fully. And again, with that in mind, with regards to the brace, we need to brace appropriately. If it's a heavy weight, we need a heavy brace. If it's a lightweight, we need a light brace. So all of that is going to help us withstand this greater force that's going through the spine. But as I've mentioned, the neutral spine will withstand the greatest forces with a brace, as opposed to a mildly flexed spine or a fully flexed spine. So number 3 is it can withstand greater forces.